My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old, living a quiet, busy life in Chicago alongside my husband, Daniel, and our 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. To me, Sophie is the brightest light in our home, the kindest, sweetest soul you could ever hope to meet. She spends her afternoons lost in her own little world, painting vibrant watercolors, baking batches of chocolate chip cookies, and leaving tiny, handwritten notes tucked under my pillow that read, "Have a happy day, Mommy." However, there was one person in our lives who seemed completely blind to Sophie's magic. My mother-in-law, Linda. From the very moment Sophie was born, Linda turned our lives into a series of cruel comparisons. She constantly measured my daughter against Daniel's sister's children, and Sophie always seemed to fall short in her eyes. "They're much sharper," she'd remark over tea. "They have so much more natural talent. Honestly, they just behave better." At first, I tried to stay silent. I swallowed my pride and ignored the subtle stings for the sake of the family. But deep down, I knew Sophie was starting to notice. I could see it in the way her smile would falter whenever her grandmother entered the room. One humid Saturday afternoon, Linda sent out a formal invitation to the entire family for what she called a special family dinner. Every instinct I had told me to stay home, but Daniel looked at me with those tired, pleading eyes. "Please, Emily," he whispered. "Let's just keep the peace for one night." For me, reluctantly, I agreed. When we pulled up to the house, it was already overflowing with guests. Daniel's sister, Rebecca, was there, preening alongside her 2 children. Linda was in her element, parading everyone through the house to show off her expensive new decorations, acting as if she were hosting a royal gala rather than a simple dinner. Amidst the noise and the flashing jewelry, Sophie stood perfectly still beside me. She looked so small, her little fingers tightly gripping the handles of a tiny pink gift bag. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of nerves and hope, "I made something special for Grandma. Do you think she'll like it?" I looked down at her and managed a small, encouraging smile. "What did you make, sweetie?" "A bracelet," she whispered, her eyes shining with pride. I used all of her favorite colors. In that moment, my heart absolutely melted. I knew how much effort had gone into that tiny treasure. Sophie had spent 3 grueling days meticulously picking through her art box, choosing the perfect beads to string together by hand. However, the warmth disappeared the moment we sat down for dinner. Throughout the meal, Linda's voice dominated the room as she showered Rebecca's children with non-stop praise. "Jason took first place in the regional math competition," she announced, beaming. "And little Emma is already mastering the piano. Such focus for her age." Then, her cold gaze suddenly shifted, landing heavily on Sophie. "And what about you, Sophie? Are you still wasting your time drawing those little cartoons all day?" A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the table. I watched as Sophie's shoulders slumped and she lowered her head, trying to make herself invisible. I couldn't stay quiet. "She's incredibly creative, Linda," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Linda let out a soft, condescending laugh that set my teeth on edge. "Well, creativity doesn't pay the bills, does it?" I glanced at Sophie and saw her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to defend his daughter, but he remained silent, staring at his plate. That silence cut deeper than any of Linda's insults. After the meal, despite the tension, Sophie plucked up her courage. She walked slowly toward Linda, holding out the pink gift bag with trembling hands. "Grandma," she said, her voice small and shy. "I made this especially for you." The room grew quiet as Linda opened the bag with agonizing slowness. She pulled out the handmade bracelet, and for a fleeting second, I allowed myself to hope. I thought that perhaps, seeing the effort of an 8-year-old child, she would finally find a shred of kindness. But instead, Linda's face contorted into a frown. Then she laughed, not a laugh of joy, but a sharp, mocking sound that rang through the dining room. "In front of everyone," she said, her voice loud and biting, "this looks incredibly cheap." The entire room froze. Sophie looked as if she had been struck. Linda didn't stop there. "I'm a woman of status, Sophie. I can't be expected to wear something that looks like it was bought at a dollar store." I felt my stomach drop into a cold pit of fury. Sophie's tiny hands began to shake uncontrollably. Without a hint of remorse, Linda dropped the bracelet back into the bag and slid it dismissively across the table. "Perhaps you should give it to one of your little school friends instead." That was the breaking point. Sophie burst into a fit of sobbing, turned, and ran upstairs toward the guest bathroom, her small footsteps echoing against the floor. I stood up immediately, my chair screeching against the tile. "Emily, sit down and don't overreact," Linda said, her voice as cold as ice. Overreact? My daughter's heart had just been shattered and her spirit humiliated in front of her entire family, and she expected me to sit there and finish my dinner? I followed the sound of heartbroken sobs upstairs. When I slipped into the bathroom, I found Sophie huddled on the floor, crying so violently she could barely catch her breath. "I tried really hard, Mommy," she whispered through her tears. "I just wanted her to be happy." That sentence shattered what was left of my patience. I pulled her into a tight, protective embrace, and in that quiet, tear-filled room, I made a silent vow. I was done staying quiet. I was done keeping the peace. Protected her from her comments. Linda stared at him in pure disbelief. "You're taking her side? Against your own mother?" Daniel's voice was quiet but like steel. "I'm taking my daughter's side." The room fell into a stunned hush. For the first time in my memory, Linda had lost her grip on the room. Without another word, Daniel walked upstairs. A minute later, he returned carrying Sophie's small, worn-out drawing notebook. He opened it and laid it flat on the table for everyone to see. Inside were dozens of vibrant, innocent drawings. There were family picnics, colorful cartoons, and handmade birthday cards. Then, he flipped to a specific page, a drawing of Linda, smiling widely, wearing the handmade bracelet. Underneath, in Sophie's messy, earnest handwriting, were the words, "Best grandma ever." Rebecca covered her mouth, a sob escaping her throat. I saw tears welling in Daniel's eyes. Even Linda looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. Daniel closed the notebook slowly. "This is how she sees you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And tonight you broke her heart." Linda didn't say a word, not a single defense. We gathered our belongings and walked out the door. The car ride home was draped in silence. In the back seat, Sophie eventually fell asleep, her small fingers still gripping the pink bag tightly. That night, Daniel sat on the edge of our bed and put his head in his hands. "I failed both of you," he admitted. I looked at him and spoke the hard truth. "An apology is a start, Daniel, but it's not enough. Things have to change." And they did. For the next 2 months, we drew a hard line. We stopped attending family gatherings, and Daniel no longer allowed Linda to slip in innocent criticisms during their phone calls. We chose peace over obligation. Then, one rainy evening, there was a soft knock at our door. It was Linda. She looked older, humbler, and she was holding a small, elegant box. Sophie instinctively hid behind my legs. Sophie instinctively hid behind my legs, her eyes wide with caution. Linda knelt down slowly, meeting Sophie at eye level. She opened the box. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was the handmade bracelet, but now it was preserved inside a beautiful glass display case. Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I was cruel, Sophie," she whispered, "and I don't expect you to forgive me today or even tomorrow." She looked up at the bracelet. "But I want you to know, this is the most meaningful gift anyone has ever given me. I was just too selfish to see it before." The silence stretched on for a long time. Finally, Sophie asked softly, "You really like it, Grandma?" Linda nodded, her lip trembling. "I love it." After a moment of hesitation, Sophie stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around her grandmother's neck. That moment didn't just fix a dinner. It shifted the foundation of our entire family. Because sometimes, the smallest children are the ones who teach adults the lessons they should have learned a lifetime ago. That love isn't measured in gold or status, but in the effort of a kind heart.